One of the reasons for changing to a gas boiler would be to be more environmentally friendly and thinking about your carbon footprint. Although for me, that wasn't my first and primary motivation, it is a good secondary factor and is something that we have taken into account. So I want to run through some of the figures of exactly how much carbon you can save. The website Nesta is a great place to start. There's also, you can calculate your carbon footprint on carbonfootprint.com. But Nesta's a charity, it's UK specific, and it's got loads of great articles on there and some good information. But here's the highlights. Home heating accounts for 38% of all UK gas use. An average household gas boiler emits 2.2 tonnes of CO2 per year. And then it gives some equivalents. 7 flights between London and New York. Driving from Land's End to John O'Groats 13 times in a new petrol or diesel car. Eating 1,263 quarter pounders made with British beef. That sounds disgusting. If you were to do that in 1 year, that's quite a few quarter pounders every single day. Leaving a 10-watt light bulb on for 139 years. So where some of us get very particular about some of the small things in life, like leaving light bulbs on, for example, in my house and telling my kids, maybe we should start by looking at some of the bigger things. Anyway, there's plenty of other information in here. It talks about heat pumps and how they can be more environmentally friendly, have a lower impact, and then it compares some of the other issues. But quite interesting for me is that a gas boiler for a lot of people in the UK is their biggest source of carbon emissions. For a great majority of people, it's actually more than it is for their travel, for example. If you go onto the carbon footprint calculator and you can have a look and put in loads of information about your house and your not just a gas usage, but if you're on oil or LPG or whatever you may be, if you travel by bus or rail, motorbike like me, or car. It was interesting. Let me just run into Nesta for a second. This is a real simple one, and this is based on a gas boiler. So I know that the annual consumption was 14,000 kilowatt hours. So let's change that to year. See my total. Our gas heating produces over 2.5 tonnes of CO2 per year, and that's as much as 8 transatlantic flights, 16 drives from Land's End to John O'Groats, 5 years of constant TV streaming, 16 years of not recycling, 162 years of running a 10-watt light bulb. This is all 1 year of gas consumption, by the way. So what is the 1474 divided by 365? Oh, that's four. Was that 4 quarter pounders? Was it? Yeah, 4 quarter pounders per day, every single day for a year. So a lot of people who want to cut their carbon emissions by diet changes, maybe looking at your gas boiler is a great place to start. And maybe you could indulge once in a while on some red meat. Anyway, we shouldn't go down that rabbit hole. Okay, this is a great figure. That shows how much our gas boiler is using, but we need to compare that to a heat pump because a heat pump isn't free of emissions. Well, for some people it may be. We don't currently have solar or a home storage battery, so we are on a typical mixed energy tariff where we know that on the average day over the course of a year, about 40% of that energy that is provided to us through the electric grid is renewable. That is increasing constantly. Every year that ticks up by 1 or 2%. It actually, over the last 10 years, the amount of renewable energy in our grid has increased exponentially. So that will continue to increase. A gas boiler will never become greener, no matter what anyone wants to tell you. Specifically, our gas boiler is probably... where am I going with this? Our gas boiler was particularly bad for the environment because it was so inefficient. It wasn't actually using all of those kilowatt hours and therefore kilograms of CO2 and converting the majority of that into heat. At least with a modern condensing boiler, you are pumping most of the burn-in and the emissions. You are converting that mostly into heat that's generated to heat your home, whereas with our old non-condensing boiler we weren't in that situation, so it was even worse for us. But a heat pump right now may only be using 40% of renewable energy from the grid. In 10 years time that may be as much as 60%. It could even be higher than that. Depends who you want to believe and where you want to read. So let's have some other comparisons. It's cleared the calculation. Okay, so we have a Seat Alhambra, 2-litre diesel people carrier. It's a great family car. Luckily, we don't drive it every day, so mostly we cycle and motorbike it. And my wife's got a little scooter, so we don't use the car very much. But if we were to travel 9,000 miles per year in our 2-litre diesel massive 7-seater people carrier, it would be emitting the same amount of CO2, roughly the same 2.5 tons as a gas boiler would. If you don't know how many miles, you can go into here and you can pick what year your vehicle is, and you can work out what mileage you're doing, and it will use the stated manufacturer mile per gallon figure, which we know isn't true as well. We know they're optimistic on that, so this is going to be a little bit generous, this calculator, but you can pop your registration number in here. You can look at your previous your annual MOT, and you can see what your annual mileage is, so that you can accurately do this calculation. Anyway, where was the next page? Here we go. You can reduce the emissions your home heating generates by 75%. So we could reduce that 2,560 kilos, wasn't it? Down, and 75% of that is 1,920 kilograms of CO2 that we could save every year by swapping to a heat pump. So, and over on the right hand side, you may have been reading some of these, it shows that instead of 8 transatlantic flights that a gas boiler would take, it will be 2 transatlantic flights. Now, this shows a massive reduction in CO2 by jumping from a gas boiler to a heat pump, but that's only the start. Of course, heat pumps, as I've said, are going to become greener as the grid becomes greener, because it's being powered by electricity that can be fully renewable. Now, ultimately, the approach and our next step in our kind of drive for being self-sufficient and sustainable here in our home is solar on the roof and home battery. Judging by some of the reports with some of the other individuals who are sharing some of their data online, if you put enough solar panels on the roof and you have enough battery storage to get you through the night, you can be running completely grid-free. Seems a bit pie in the sky. It seems like it's the ultimate dream, and of course there's a significant financial investment needed to get there, but it is possible for us to not only reduce our carbon emissions from heating our home from 2,560 kilograms down by 75%, and save ourselves 1,920 kilograms immediately just by switching from a gas boiler to a heat pump. We could actually save the extra 640 kilograms that we are still emitting because the grid isn't fully green. So we're still emitting 640 kilograms of CO2 currently. There are some other ways around that. There's some smart tariffs that you can power your heat pump, like Octopus Cozy, for example, that that is optimized so that you will blast your heat pump when the grid is the cleanest, and when the grid is under a bit more strain and it's a bit dirtier, and you know there's going to be gas-fired power plants in the grid mix, then those would be the times where you switch your heat pump off. So there are other ways to optimize it, but I'm just talking about some general figures. I've waffled on far too much. I hope some of this was helpful. I hope some of these websites were helpful. As I said again, Nesta.org.uk, they're a charity. There's a lot of great information on there. It's a good place to start. Carbonfootprint.com, another great website. You can put in all kinds of stuff, even your meat consumption and everything else, and you can work out all of your carbon consumption, and you can work out your total carbon consumption. And you may be surprised that if, like me, you cycle and you don't use your car that much, you'll probably find that your house is your number one emission of carbon. And so switching from a gas boiler to a heat pump will have a much greater impact on your carbon footprint than stopping your foreign holidays, switching to an electric car, or working from home or whatever it may be. Anyway, I've waffled on far too much. I hope this was a little bit interesting in some way. I hope this was helpful. If you are considering a switch to a switch from a gas boiler, then I would highly recommend it. And I think that heat pumps are the future for the vast majority of households. That's all from me.